Through you, I can do anything. I can do all things, 'cause it's you who gives me strength. For nothing is impossible. Through you, blind eyes are open. The strongholds are broken. I am living by faith. Nothing is impossible. what He's done for you, what does that stir up inside of you? What does that stir up within your heart and your soul? Does it get you to a place where you want to say, shout out, hallelujah, thank you, Jesus? You want to say, hallelujah, thank you, Jesus? It is all about worshiping Him. I'm telling you, there's freedom in worship. So as we think about Him, I hope it stirs up something inside of you. Hope it does what it is to say. When I think about the Lord, how He saved me, how He raised me, how He filled me with the Holy Ghost, how He healed me to the uttermost. When I think about the Lord, how He picked me up and turned me around, how He placed my feet on solid ground, it makes me want to shout, hallelujah, thank you, Jesus, Lord, you're worthy of all of the glory, of all of the honor, and all of the praise. It makes me want to shout, hallelujah, thank you, Jesus, Lord, you're worthy of all of the glory, and all of the honor, and all of the praise. It makes me want to shout. Don't give the Lord the praise when you do that. Lord, I long to see your face, your power, and glory. Lord, we don't wait till we're to see you. We can experience it now. I've waited all my life to be here face to face. I never knew that I could feel this kind of grace.
taken by the wonder of your name. Was desperate for your touch, never needed it so much. All I want is you.
One last time, say, I stand here in this place, see the glory on your face, taken by the wonder of your name. Oh, I'm desperate for your touch, never needed it so much, 'cause all I want is you. And I stand here in this place, see the glory on your face. I'm taken by the wonder of your name. Lord, I'm desperate for your touch. Yes, I am. Never needed it so much. All I want is you. Give him a shout. Bless you. and I am yours. I am yours. Jesus, I am yours. Come on, shout out his name. Shout out his name. I just find that humorous. I love those commercials. When I thought about it, just again, the slide behind me should be different today. I love the robber in the
Yes.
Old West. So sweet. Give me your money. And then he blows his mind. But God is an awesome God. He truly is. He desires to be a mind-blowing God in your life. He already is a mind-blowing God. And you know, as We shared a little bit last week, but again, as I said, we're going to start this adventure by looking at a mind-blowing God, looking through the Word of God, and hopefully looking at it a little differently, maybe us doing some things a little different. You notice I had the tape up here again today, and we're going to try something again today. We're going to try something that God tried and see how we fare. We'll get there in a little bit, probably more towards the end of the message, but we're going to do that. But as we started last week, I'm going to start this week off. What does the Bible say about the awesomeness of God? And here's just a few verses. Now, this is the verse we used last week. I have a different verse for the second verse this morning. But here's what we used last week. In Isaiah chapter 40, verses 25 to 26, it says, "To whom will you compare me? Who is my equal? Asked the Holy One." So God, in the book of Isaiah, God is speaking. Who can be compared to? Who can we begin to just say, this is like God, or this person like God? God is beginning to say, he said, there's no comparison. Because in verse 25 it says, "Look up into the heavens. Who created all the stars? He brings them out like an army, one after another, calling each by its name. Because of His great power and incomparable strength, not a single one is missing." It's all because of who God is. Because of His incomparable power and His great strength. Everything we see in all creation is by His command. Then we read this in Psalms 33. Psalms 33 verses 6 through 9 says, "The Lord merely spoke," and we found this out as we were looking at creation last week. "The Lord merely spoke, and the heavens were created. He breathed the word, and all the stars were born. He assigned the seas its boundaries and locked the oceans in vast reservoirs. Let the whole world fear the Lord. Let everyone stand in awe of Him." In other words, let everyone have a mind-blowing experience about who He is. Let everyone stand in awe of Him. "For when He spoke, the world began. It appeared at His command." And like I said, last week we discovered about our mind-blowing God in His act of creation, that He's a mind-blowing God in the act of creation. When you read, "Then God said so-and-so, and that happened," from a human standpoint, that is mind-blowing. Remember, we talked about, I said, how much can you sit there and say, "Let there be light"? I sort of hinted to you what last week? You mentioned it came out probably about 15, 20 years ago. Clap on, clap off, clap, that thing. And now we have smartphones, and I shared that to where if you're not home, if you have the technology in your home, you can lock your doors, you can turn on your lights, you can adjust your heat, you can turn your washer on, turn your dryer on, and all this kind of stuff. Turn it off, tell it to lay. I remember years ago, one time when we were looking for a new stove for our house, now I'm going back about 15, 16 years ago with this, we went to Best Buy, and at the time they had this stove, it was like $3,000. At the time, which it doesn't sound too bad today, but go back 15 years ago and put $3,000 on a stove, okay? But what it was one of these smart stoves. It had a refrigerator unit built in and all that stuff. So what you could do was, it was a little stove. You could actually put your meal in there, program it, what you wanted it to do, turn it on. So what it would do, it would refrigerate it until it was time to start. Then it would kick on and heat it up. And if you didn't open the door by a certain time, the refrigerator would kick back on to make it cold so it would go bad. And I'm like, wow. But at the time we said, we don't need a stove like that. Now I'm sure they have it. You can do it with your phone. You do everything with your phone. We're looking at a new soundboard. I know there's digital ones out there. You can control with iPads or smartphones and all that stuff. So, if you see me, if we have one of those, he would have started doing this. Oh, he's just divided. But I mean, it's amazing how everything. This is now, even at home, you can download an app and turn this into what? Your remote control for your TV. But it's some wild stuff. And I said all the stuff on where we're all going with that. Yeah, my Oh, about how we couldn't, we can't do a lot of those things. And last week I had someone come by, I had sand up here and all this stuff. I had Kayla come up and I had her make you some sand and some water put together. And on the tray make a stick figure. And I said, now blow into it and make it alive. But literally, when you think about it, with what God did through creation, talking about the clapper and all this, what God did through creation, by just simply speaking, He says, He spoke. And that's what happened. I mean, just think about it. That talks about the awesomeness of who God is, the awesomeness of His power. And today I want to I'm not going to look at creation per se, but I'm still going to look at the awesomeness of His power and His blow-mind weight, and that He delivered Israel and made them into His nation. He did some awesome things when He brought Israel out of slavery. So that's what we're going to look at today. We're going to look at that, and really when I get to the end, I'm going through to really get to the end. But I need to put all this background out there. There's a lot of background to get, so I'm trying not to be doing this too much because there's a lot. I have 4 pages here, which I'm going to try to get through very, very, very quickly, okay? But it's more so notes than even scripture verses. If I have 4 pages of scripture, you'd be in trouble. But it's maybe some notes to go down. But like I said, today we'll look at God's mind-blowing way that He delivered Israel and made them into His nation. We read in Exodus chapter 5, verses 1 and 2, it says, "After this presentation to Israel's leaders, Moses and Aaron went and spoke to Pharaoh. They told him, 'This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. Let my people go, so that they may hold a festival in my honor in the wilderness.' 'Is that so?' retorted Pharaoh. 'Who is the Lord? Why should I listen to him and let Israel go? I don't know the Lord, and I will not let Israel go.'" So here we're introduced to a scene where, if you know anything about this, Moses, he originally tries to deliver Israel. When you go to the first of Exodus and begin to read this, you find out, first off, Moses is delivered supernaturally. You know, he was born under a death sentence. If a male Israelite was born, they were supposed to be killed. But his mom did not want to do that. As we know, she kept him hid as long as she could and stuck him in a basket, put him out in the river. And as he's floating down, his sister walks on shore, and just happens Pharaoh's daughter's out there. And she has compassion on this child and ends up taking Moses and raises Moses as her own son. So God delivered Moses in a miraculous way already. And then Moses on his own tried to step out and help Israel, but he messed up big time. You know, he ended up killing an Egyptian, trying to defend an Israelite. And then when he tried to let the people realize that he was there to be their savior, that God placed him in that type of way, they were saying, "You're going to kill us like you did the Egyptian." And he runs. And for 40 years, he's in the wilderness hiding from this thing. And then 40 years later, God comes to him and miraculously calls him back to lead the people of Israel. So after God finally gets through Moses' head that he's the one, you notice what I said, after God finally got through Moses' head that he's the one, Moses is now in front of the leaders of Israel, and he presents to them the proofs that God gave him that he truly was called by God to deliver them out of Egypt. So he shows him that proof. And after that, this is where we pick up, Moses goes to Pharaoh and says, "God says, let my people go." And Pharaoh goes, "Who's that?" "I don't know, Lord." I can basically see, Pharaoh thinks, "What you talking about, Moses? You're just a slave who was taken to our household. You were given the best life and you turned on us." I can just sort of say, you turned on us. So, I don't even know who the Lord you're talking about. See, but I have there, I said, Pharaoh's stubborn determination was by divine design. While Pharaoh hardened his own heart, at the same time, God hardened his heart so that he would resist God, providing the occasion for God's power to be demonstrated to the Egyptians, the Israelites, and the surrounding nations. We read this in chapter 7, verses 3 through 5, and it says, "But I will make Pharaoh's heart stubborn, so I can multiply my miraculous signs and wonders in the land of Egypt. Even then, Pharaoh will refuse to listen to you. So I will bring down my fist on Egypt. Then I will rescue my forces, my people, the Israelites, from the land of Egypt with great acts of judgment. When I raise my powerful hand and bring out the Israelites, the Egyptians will know that I am the Lord." And we're going to get into it, but God, He has a desire to make sure His power is made known in this earth. God has a desire for His power to be made known. Now today, He may not necessarily do it as we see Him do it in the Old Testament. He still can, because what? God is God. But we as His people today, He wants us to live in such a way that people around us know the power of God is still real and alive. That's why it's so important for us to truly live the life that Christ has laid out there for us. Why we're making sure we're walking according to His plan and His purpose and not according to our own desires and wants. Because again, going back to Moses real quick, when Moses tried to do it on his own, he failed miserably. But when Moses did it the way that God said, Moses ends up being successful. We're going to sort of hint on that. We're going to talk about a little bit of that today. But God declares He's going to declare His power against Egypt. And by the time I'm done, Egypt will know. Pharaoh may have said, who's this God? But Egypt will know that I am the Lord. Egypt will know that there is a God who reigns over and looks after Israel. He says, they will know. So, the way God does this, He does it through a thing called, what we call the 10 plagues. The 10 plagues that He brought against Egypt. We read about the 10 plagues in Egypt in Exodus chapter 7 through 12. These plagues are punishments on Pharaoh and Egypt for not allowing God's people, Israel, to go free from slavery. So, is there a consequence for not listening to God? Most definitely. Because when God told Pharaoh when Pharaoh didn't listen to God, we're going to see what God did to him. And what God allowed to happen because Pharaoh decided to be stubborn. See, Pharaoh demonstrated his power to the Israelites by not letting them go and by questioning who the Lord is when He said in verse 2 of chapter 5, so, is that so, retorted Pharaoh? And who is the Lord? Why should I listen to Him and let Israel go? Listen, why should I listen to Him and let Israel go? I don't know the Lord, and I will not let Israel go. Makes me think of another king in the Bible. I don't have time to really share it on today, but when a guy named Sennacherib came against Jerusalem in Hezekiah's time, and he touted some big things, saying, well, it's the Lord who told me to come here, but yet besides that, what God's going to deliver you out of my hands? So when he began talking against Hezekiah and against the God of Israel, all of a sudden, he wasn't just degrading Israel, he was degrading God. And when you get to that point, have you ever picked on somebody you know that could stomp you in the ground and they restrained? And they just kept on, but then all of a sudden, maybe you stepped a little bit too far and they let you real quick understand and realize that they're a lot stronger than you are. Has everybody had that done to them? I've done it to somebody. I remember in school, there was this kid, he was messing with me. I was bigger than he was, he was smarter than I was. And for some reason, he just wanted to pick on me. Finally, I took it for time, and finally, I just had enough. So, you know what, that's it. I pummeled him. He didn't mess with me again. So I basically, you want to push this thing, go ahead. But when you just take that one step too far, all of a sudden, boom, here you go. And that's literally what Pharaoh did to God. See, each of the plagues affected the Egyptians and the land in different ways. Some of the plagues affected the Israelites as well. But all of the plagues are targeted at different Egyptian gods. In other words, God was going to show Himself to be supreme over everything that Egypt knew to be what they knew to be true. What they thought to be gods. And through the 10th and final plague, God pronounced His judgment on all the gods of Egypt. In Exodus chapter 12, verse 12, we read, and on that night I will pass through the land of Egypt, and I will strike down every firstborn son, every firstborn male animal in the land of Egypt. I will execute judgment against all the gods of Egypt, for I am the Lord. See, God sent Moses and Aaron to Pharaoh to ask for the release of his people so that they could worship him freely. And initially, Pharaoh refused, and Moses demonstrated God's power by turning Aaron's staff into a serpent. But then what happened? The magicians of Pharaoh turned their staffs into serpents also. Well, we talked before, Moses, God told me a stick and it turned to a snake and told me to pick it back up and said, you're crazy. But Moses did that. But the thing is, Moses' stick, his serpent, ate all the other serpents. That was one of the first things that he did, but yet Pharaoh refused to listen. So God begins to say, okay, now I'm going to stretch forth my hand against Egypt. And he begins to release 10 plagues. The first plague he released was called the plague of blood. Aaron, at the command of Moses, raised his staff over the Nile River, and the water turned to blood, causing the fish to die and fill the land with an awful odor. To prove his own power, Pharaoh had his sorcerers turn more water into blood. Now, don't ask me, I don't know if they did that, but again, they did. They were able to do that. And they eventually had to dig wells to get fresh water, and this plague lasted for a week. Can you imagine anywhere you look for water? I mean, the basins that you had, if you had like reservoirs of water sitting inside, you go to get it, and all of a sudden there's blood. Can you just imagine just even the stench that, that was there? So that's the first plague that God calls to be on Egypt. But yet, like I said, the sorcerers of Pharaoh, they were able to do something sort of the same. So Pharaoh's like, no big deal. My guys can do the same thing. And then we read, the second one was the plague of frogs. Aaron raised his staff over the streams and over the rivers, causing the frogs to come out of the river. And the frogs overran the country. The Bible says that the frogs were in their bedrooms, beds, and kitchens. How would you like to go home and have critters all over your house? They were everywhere. And it says the Egyptian sorcerers were also, they made more frogs appear. And Pharaoh considered letting the Israelites go. They said, look, he said, give me till tomorrow. He said, Moses, I'll do it. Just take the frogs away. Moses says, choose your time. And I remember years ago, a friend of mine, he actually preached a message on this actual plague here and said, one more night with the frogs. Moses gave Pharaoh the opportunity to say, okay, when you want the frogs gone? Pharaoh could have said, right now. But he said, tomorrow. So that's what God did. God let him stick around a little bit longer. And yet, and the thing is, the frogs begin to disappear, but they also begin to die, and they begin to pile up and just stink up the whole land. Then, another plague that God sent upon Egypt was the plague of lice. The next plague was brought on by Aaron striking the dust with his staff. This caused the plague of lice. The Egyptian sorcerers were not able to produce this one. It caused them to finally declare that the plagues were on them by God, were brought on them by God. So in other words, the sorcerers, his magicians, begin to realize, hey, there's a bigger guy in play than us, because we can't do this. We can't duplicate this. And they're trying to convince Pharaoh that this is the hand of God, but he still says, no. But could you imagine just taking a stick, striking the ground, and all of a sudden, lice comes everywhere?
Yeah.
Having your hair on your body.
Oh, God.
The creepy crawlies, right? And all over. Then that plague passed, and then all of a sudden, then he brings on the plague of flies. The Bible says that this plague only affected the land of the Egyptians. See, all the ones we read before affected all the land. So it affected the Egyptians and the Israelites alike. So first, to think about if you're an Israelite, Moses coming doing this stuff, and it's affecting you now. You're like, I thought you were supposed to be messing with them, not us. But you gotta remember, God is a wise God, and he did this for a reason. Because all of a sudden he wanted to show, okay, yeah, I'm affecting the entire land of Egypt, but now I'm going to show you where my favor is. And when he brings this one on, it only affected the Egyptians and not the Israelites. So God was beginning to draw a distinction between who was his and who wasn't his. So in the land of Goshen, where the Israelites said there was no flies at all. But again, Pharaoh refused to let the people go free. Even though the plague was removed. He said he would, but again, he backed out again. Then God brings on the plague of pestilence. This plague only affected the Egyptians' cattle. All the cattle of the Egyptians died. But again, none of the Israelites' animals were harmed. None of their cattle were harmed. Then God brings about the plague of boils. This was the skin disease which was brought about by when Moses and Aaron grabbed some ashes from a furnace and threw them into the air. And again, Pharaoh's magicians, he tried to call them in, but they couldn't even come in to see him because they themselves had all these boils all over them. Not only did they have boils, but the rest of the beasts that were left, the rest of the animals that were left in Egypt, besides the cows, because they were already dead, they also had the boils. So, I mean, God's beginning to declare his power here. Now, again, when I'm saying all this stuff, who's here able to make flies appear out of nowhere? Now, again, I can tell you, I know how to make flies appear. I can leave some trash outside or inside the house, like some rinds, just so that the trash begins to just become putrid. And isn't it amazing? And also, you begin to see what you see those green flies, which come from what we call. Well, first, before you see the green flies, what do you see? Anybody know? Little white things. What do we call them? Maggots.
Right. Yeah.
And all of a sudden, and it's amazing how all those flies are usually. Have you ever sort of like get green, like greenish? Have you ever noticed? Or you say, Pastor, I don't look that hard at the fly, but they're usually those green. They're green maggot flies, are what they are.
Green maggot flies.
You know, and also, and then the boils. how much can make lice come or make frogs come? I mean, it's amazing when you see this, that God has caused this to happen through his servants. And then God brings on the plague of hail. Moses stretched out his hands toward the sky and brought on hail. The hail was unlike any they had experienced before. The hail was mixed with fire. So imagine hail on fire coming down out of the sky. The people were not doomed to suffer this plague. Now listen very carefully to what I'm saying here. The people were not doomed to suffer this plague. It was made clear that anyone outside during the storm would be punished. But if they would go inside and take their animals in with them, they would be spared the harshness of the storm. So God, again, he's now, and God begin to move and say, well, okay, if you begin to listen to what I'm doing, let it really begin to settle in, you can spare yourself some heartache. You can spare yourself some hardship. So anyone who went inside was spared this, but anyone who did not, they were destroyed by this storm. Their animals were killed by the storm. And also this storm destroyed many of the crops that the Egyptians had. But again, the land of Goshen, where the Israelites lived, was spared from this punishment. Then God sends a plague of locusts. Moses came to Pharaoh once again, but he refused to let the children of Israel free. Not even at the request of his servants. His servants saying, God and Pharaoh, let them go, let them go. This God is destroying our land. Please, let them go. And he refused to do that. But Pharaoh did consent to let the men go. He said, you know, the men can go, but the women and children have to stay here. But Moses said, no, it's all of us or none of us. So he raised his rod up over Egypt, and a strong east wind blew that day. And after the wind was done blowing, it brought these locusts, which the locust is not the locust we think of. They were actually what we would think of as grasshoppers. And the grasshoppers came in and ate the rest of the green stuff and the plants that were in the land. But Pharaoh still hardened his heart. And then the ninth plague that the Lord brings him was called the plague of darkness. Now this is something, when the Bible describes this, I find this mind-boggling. Here's what it says: is the plague of darkness was described as being so dark that it could be felt. The darkness was so dark that it could be felt. And the darkness lasted for 3 days. But however, the Israelites had light in their houses. So imagine, when we read that, it makes you think of that. Even if the Egyptians were to light light, they couldn't see. Imagine it being that dark and just being able to feel the darkness. Now, talk about being a creepy. That would be the time you say, that's when we need to write a horror story. Not scare somebody. But this plague lasted, and Pharaoh, again, he still refused to let the Israelites go. Then finally, God brings one last plague on the Egyptians. And then with this plague, God says, Pharaoh will let you go after this. He's going to let you go. And the final plague was the plague of the death of the firstborn of all the people and the animals. But this plague, though, even though this was the last plague, this plague would affect everyone. This would affect the Egyptians and the Israelites alike. But it came down to, after they've seen all these plagues happen, whether or not you're going to listen to the instruction that the man of God gave. And Moses, he said, the only way to escape this plague is to, first off, you have to sacrifice a lamb, a sheep or a goat, either a young sheep or a young goat. You would have to sacrifice it, and you'd have to drain its blood. You would have to take the blood, now think about it, you would have to take the blood and paint the doorpost of your home with it. The main entrance to your home, on this side, the top, and on this side. He says that's the only way to escape this plague, because when the death angel will come, if he sees the blood over the door, he'll pass over your house. But if you don't do that, the firstborn male child in your family will die, and the firstborn male animal in your herds will die. And everyone who did that avoided the punishment, and anyone who did not do that, the plague came down upon them. And we read in the scripture that says that Pharaoh's household was hit with this plague. He didn't listen. Many people didn't listen. The fact is, during the middle of the night, Pharaoh sent for them to literally kick them out of Egypt. In fact, God told him, he says, they're going to be such a rush to get ready. I'm going to display my power so much upon them that when they see this, you're not going to leave Egypt into hand. You're literally going to spoil them like you're going to take spoils for them as a conquering army that would come in and defeat them. Think about it. Back then, if an army came in and they beat the city or whatever they were facing, they would basically take all their possessions. They would take whatever was all the valuables and take them for plunder. And God says, when I'm done, literally, you're going to plunder Egypt without fighting. And that's exactly what happened. That Israel plundered Egypt without fighting. And Pharaoh just literally forced them out of the land. And Israel, as they're leaving, I said, they're plundering Egypt. The Egyptians are just throwing gifts of plunder because what is, they're trying to appease their God and say, look, we're trying to show favor to your people. So they leave, and Israel finds themselves, they're now all of a sudden free. And before I get to the next part, which is where I'm mainly going to end with what's going on in the next part where I want to go to, we've seen how God did a lot of miraculous things to get Israel to the place where they're free. And here's the thing I want to tell you. There are many times that we may see God do some miraculous things in our lives that brings a place where it seems like we also have freedom. But once that freedom comes, don't think all of a sudden that the devil is all of a sudden trying to put doubt in your mind. And I'm going to show you what I'm talking about in just a second. Because any times where it seems like there's a great victory in our lives, especially where it's a great spiritual victory, you better be ready. The devil's going to come and attack to make sure you believe what you say you believe. To see if you really believe that victory has truly been delivered by God or not. And here's how I'm going to show it to you. So we see here that God used all these plagues to deliver Israel out of Egypt from slavery. So they're set free from slavery. But now we get to a place where Israel is getting, as they're leaving Egypt, Moses is leading them, and he takes them to, instead of taking the most direct route, through God's leading, he takes them to an area near the coast of the Dead Sea. Not the Dead Sea, the Red Sea. And as they get there, Pharaoh changes his mind. And he pursues after them. He basically says, what are we doing? Basically, all our workers are gone. What do we do? Yeah, they made them bad, but we want them back. So he pursues after them. And the Israelites, when they realize that Pharaoh's army is coming this way, and the Red Sea's behind them, they begin to panic. They begin to believe that they're trapped. And this is where I want to pick up some of our scripture reading today. In Exodus 14, verses 10 through 18, this is what we read. As Pharaoh approached, the people of Israel looked up and panicked when they saw the Egyptians overtaking them, and they cried out to the Lord, and they said to Moses, now listen to what they said to Moses. Why did you bring us out here to die in the wilderness? Let me stop there a second. What happened before this? What happened in their life before this? They saw what? The plagues and how God brought judgment upon Israel. And then even though the first time, even though initially the plague sort of hit them, God put a distinction there saying, look, I'm cursing the Egyptians, but I'm blessing you. So they begin to see how God was pushing, he's throwing his hand down on the Egyptians and how he's allowing that punishment to come down because of all the evil that they did to the Israelites. God's causing all these plagues. And they walked out, imagine, they walked out as free. They're set free and they're plundering the enemy. They plundered the enemy. They have goods and golds and clothing. In fact, in other words, whatever was of value, the Egyptians piled on upon them. And they left greatly blessed with material things. And they were slaves. They were found free. All of a sudden had a whole bunch of materialistic blessings. And I can see them walking out of there. Yes, they're no longer free, probably celebrating. We're no longer slaves anymore. Then all of a sudden, they forgot that quickly who it was that brought all these plagues, did all these things, allowed them to be free. Then all of a sudden, when it seems like things aren't going the way that they thought they should go, they begin to doubt who God was. That's why I said it's so important for us to realize that many times when there's a great victory in our life, the enemy's going to come in to see whether or not you really believe in that victory or not. Because here we see the Israelites complaining and fearful, and they said, why did you bring us out here to die in the wilderness? weren't there enough graves for us in Egypt? What have you done to us? Why did you make us leave Egypt? Wow. They were set free, and all of a sudden, when it seemed like something was a little bit tough, they were so ready to go back to the bondage that held them under. And so I'm here to tell you, you better be careful, because if you're not careful, you don't really have your faith in God the way you should, you will very easily re-accept the bondage that God has delivered you from. I mean, after they saw all of this miraculous stuff, they questioned. We said, leave us alone. Let us be slaves to the Egyptians. It is better to be a slave in Egypt than a corpse in the wilderness. Wow. But Moses told the people, don't be afraid. Just stand still and watch the Lord rescue you today. The Egyptians you see today will never be seen again. See, sometimes when that initial thing happens, and all of a sudden, the devil comes in, the enemy comes in to try to really see if you really believe what God did or not. What you do in that point will determine whether or not you never see that enemy again or not. What did you say there? Don't be afraid. Just stand still and watch the Lord rescue you today. The Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. See, God is offering us an opportunity to where we can truly have victory over whatever it is. But when the victory initially comes, if there's a testing that comes, we need to make sure we do what? We stand firm. We stay faithful. Because Moses tells them that. He says, the Lord himself will fight for you. Just stay calm. And again, I can understand the Israelites feeling away from it, because again, here's an army coming after them. They're not a military force, that later on they become one, but at this point, they're not a military force. They're not truly set up in ranks in order to go out and face what at the day was the ruler of the known world, the army, the greatest army in the known world at the time. But then it says in verse 15, then the Lord said to Moses, why are you crying out to me? Tell the people to keep moving. Now, that's where I find it a little comical. Behind the Israelites is the Egyptian army, right? We said it. The Egyptian army is coming. They're behind them. What's in front of the Israelites? The Red Sea water, the Red Sea. And God says, just keep moving. God, God. We have a slight problem here. I might be able to get through myself personally, but everything else I have can't. I can't very well take my carts and put it on my shoulders and swim out into the Red Sea and take it, I can sort of see, Houston, we have a problem. But God says, tell the people to get moving. But he doesn't, I thank him, he didn't stop there. He says, pick up your staff and raise your hand over the sea. Divide the water so the Israelites can walk through the middle of the sea on dry ground. Now, first off, God didn't say, raise your rod up so I can divide the sea. You notice what he said? Did you really read what it says there? He says, raise your staff up and divide the sea. So literally he's saying, Moses, you divide the sea. Okay. Yeah. But it really goes to show that the type of power that God placed upon Moses. Now again, we know it was God who did it. But Moses himself had to be obedient, because Moses would say, what? But God told him, he says, do that. Divide the water so the Israelites can walk through the middle of the seas on dry ground. And I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians, and they will charge in after the Israelites. My great glory will be displayed through Pharaoh and his troops, his chariots and his charioteers. When my glory is displayed through them, all Egypt will see my glory and know that I am the Lord. And then it says in verses 21 through 22, it says, then Moses raised his hand over the sea, and the Lord opened a path through the waters with a strong east wind. The wind blew all that night, turning the seabed into dry land. So the people of Israel walked through the middle of the sea on dry ground, with walls of water on each side. When you think about it, it's pretty wild, right? I need a volunteer today. Who'd like to volunteer? Come on, Stephen. I'm going to just give you a small test here. You can come on this side. According to some people, they sit there and say, well, you know, where God parted the water, it was only a couple inches deep. It was only a couple inches deep. So it really wasn't that great of a miracle that he parted the water or something just several inches deep. And I said, you know what? That is awesome. You know why? That means he drowned the Egyptians in inches of deep water when they pursued after the Israelites. No. The Bible says that what God did was he caused a strong wind to blow on the waters. And he parted them that way using the wind. So I'm going to see if we can, I give you have a small scale. So I'm going to see if you can give me a dry path. See, he did more than just part the waters. It was a dry path. Has anybody ever been present, like when low tide happens out by like where the bay is, or some of the different tidal rivers around here? When low tide goes out, what happens? What's left? But what's left? It's mucky mud. And who's ever gone out some of this stuff? You know, so you're going.
Yeah.
I stopped doing. I didn't choke myself doing that. It's not dry when it goes out.
Right.
It's murky. But God overnight was able to dry an entire seabed to where the Bible says that the Israelites went across on dry ground. Not just clear ground, but dry ground. So Stephen, I want you to give me a dry path across that water there. And the Bible says God did it by blowing. I mean, you can try to use your hands to separate from it, but I don't think it'll work. You can try to use your hands and blow at the same time. But let's try air first. All right, blow down. I think you might be able to get down to the bottom by blowing on hard enough. But I don't know if you would do it all the way across or not, or without blowing it all the way off the table. So I probably didn't think about this too well. Try blowing down on top of it first. Let's try that. I mean, you can get a little spot there, can't you?
He is full of hot air.
Okay, now. I mean, you can do a little spot, right? But as far as to make it all the way across, it's. And now, if you start here, I could probably have something real quick and go with this one. Look, I follow your breath across. My fingers get wet, Steve. It's supposed to stay dry. Well, I was assimilating children of Israel. Okay, I'm assimilating children of Israel. Let's try this again. Let's see if you can give me a dry path all the way across, okay? Come on, I need a dry spot. Oh, he's asthmatic. Anybody here think you have better lungs than Stephen?
No.
All right, that's it.
Fail.
You know, sometimes we read this stuff. And we really don't think about it. Again, and I'm showing you something that's just something on a small scale like this. And like I said, and initially when Stephen did breathe, when he went, I mean, I could get down, I could blow hard enough where I can get a dry spot there, but in order to make it all the way across, see, God had power. He has power over the wind, and He said He allowed the wind to come to where it blew on that sea enough to begin to part it, cause it to go back to walls, which is actually believable. If you can see how I do this here, it actually forms walls. That wind blowing down on it creates a steady wall there that won't allow that the pressure of the air cause that to happen. And to make it, God allowed this to happen all night long and long enough for almost 2 million people to cross. Because we know the Bible tells us that there were 600,000 men who left with Israel, besides women and children. So you can figure there are at least one child and one woman per man. Probably more than that. Probably at least one man, one woman, probably 2 children. Okay, so that would make it about 2.4 million people. But God allowed enough time, not only for that amount of people to get through, but everything they had to get through. God allowed the wind to be blowing in. And let it blow long enough, quick enough to where it was completely dry ground. What an awesome way that God delivers people. See, but yet they were worried. They saw all of these plagues happen to Egypt. And when God told me before, I can see Him saying, you got to be crazy. But God, when He began to move. I mean, think about it. It took faith for them to literally walk out on that seabed. But walk, because the thing is, because in your mind you're thinking, wonder if He stops blowing the wind. But the wind blew the entire time, it separated the entire time while they went across. God delivered them miraculously out of slavery, and also He miraculously delivers them from the hand of Pharaoh's pursuing army. And in fact, when they see it blowing this long, we know that the Egyptians go in after them. But something different happened. But God all of a sudden let it stop, and the waters that being held back all of a sudden became released, and they came down crashing upon the Egyptians. And it killed them there. And here's what we're reading, verses 30 and 31. It says, that is how the Lord rescued Israel from the hand of the Egyptians that day. The Israelites saw the bodies of the Egyptians washed up on the seashore. Again, if it's only a couple inches of water, the whole part can be washed up on the seashore. When the people of Israel saw the mighty power that God had unleashed against the Egyptians, they were filled with awe before Him. They put their faith in the Lord and in His servant Moses. When God brings you the victory, and then the test comes to make sure that you do believe in victory, all of a sudden you won't see that enemy anymore, but all of a sudden it's still sticking inside you, to where you will trust God like you never did before. See, a lot of times it's not the initial winning the victory that's important. I mean, yes, it's important. It's not what's most important. It's important that you hold on to that win, and you don't allow the enemy to come in and allow you to doubt what God already did. And see, that's what began to happen here. God did all these mighty plagues in Egypt, delivered the children of Israel in a mighty way. But then also, when the first sign of trouble came, they began to doubt. But then when they saw this, it began to change the way they think about the Lord. But here's the sad part about Israel. I'm not going to get into it today. This isn't the last time that they doubt the Lord. But I do want to say this as I'm getting ready to close some of this stuff in. Just as God did this for Israel, He can and He will do this for you. When it seems like you are trapped on all sides, God will make a way where there seems to be no way. The key is you have to keep your eyes upon Him. You have to keep on listening when He says go forward, what do you need to do? You need to go forward. When He says stand still, you need to do what? You need to stand still. You've got to get to a place where you become obedient, and you will see the mind-blowing power of God come alive in your life like never before.
Because we may not physically be standing by a seashore and have an enemy coming up on us from behind. But we may symbolically, through what we're going through in this life, whether it's a report of what a doctor gives because of a test that came out, or maybe what's happening at work, or what's happening in our family, the enemy is out to destroy. That's one thing I will tell you. He's out to destroy. But God is out to restore. And God is out to build up. The true question comes out of which report are you going to believe? Who you're going to believe is stronger? Are you going to believe it's the enemy? Or are you going to believe in the Lord? Even though God displayed his power in Egypt the way he did, Israel, when they first were set free, they doubted it. Then, all of a sudden, God does this. I mean, first off, I think I'd be pretty psyched. I mean, just imagine. Just put yourself in their place for a minute. Imagine truly being there. You see this happen. Also, you literally begin to see the waters part. You literally begin to see the waters part, and the seabed become dry, and all of a sudden Moses says, "Go across to the other side." Can you imagine realizing that your enemy, you're now putting distance between you and your enemy? And here's the thing, and in Israel, when that was happening, God was leading Israel by a cloud of fire by day and a pillar of cloud by night. God moved to the rear of the camp, and he put a cloud around the Egyptians to where they said all night long, even though the Egyptians were nearby, because they couldn't see because of the cloud of God, they kept on basically going in circles and never got near the Israelite camp. And as the Israelites began to get farther and farther away from the enemy was still there. Then God released the cloud, and when the Egyptians saw that, they pursued after them, and that's when their calamity came. But God did a miraculous thing in the life of the Egyptians. Like I said, and he's offering the same type of power to be alive in your life. He's offering the same type of deliverance to you if only you would truly keep your eyes upon him. And I'm going to close that with this. Our musicians can come in the background. I ended the service last week with this, and I'm ended with it again this week, and I'm just going to go through it rather quickly. This is a portion of Scripture that we started off the message with, found in Isaiah chapter 40, but I'm going to read a little bit farther than what we stopped with earlier. Starting at verse 25, again, read to verse 31, it says, "To whom will you compare me? Who is my equal?" asked the Holy One. "Look up into the heavens. Who created all the stars? He brings them out like an army, one after the other, calling each by its name because of his great power and incomparable strength. Not a single one is missing." Then he says in verse 27, "O Jacob, how can you say the Lord does not see your troubles?" See, again, even at this point, this is hundreds of years later after this. Israel forgot how great their God is. And said, basically, God doesn't care. He doesn't see, he doesn't care. But as he saw what was happening there at the Red Sea, he saw what was happening here too. As he saw what was happening at the Red Sea, he sees what's happening in your life. But here's what we read, what he says about this. "O Israel, how can you say how can you say the Lord doesn't see your troubles? How can you say God ignores your rights? Have you not heard? Have you never understood? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of all the earth. He never grows weak or weary. No one can measure the depths of his understanding. He gives power to the weak and strength to the powerless." What does he do? He gives power to the weak and strength to the powerless. "Even youths will become weak and tired, and young men will fall in exhaustion." But verse 31 says, "But those who trust in the Lord," who? Those who what? Those who trust. "Those who trust in the Lord will find new strength. They will soar high on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not faint." And I shared this last week. The King James puts the first part of verse 31 this way: "But those who wait upon the Lord." Wait there, I had the definition. Wait there means to bind together, perhaps by twisting. As an example, to collect, figuratively, to expect together, to look, to be patiently tarrying, to wait on or wait upon or wait for. But as I have other truths, the first part of this definition sparks in my mind a visualization of someone grabbing a hold of and not letting go. And I shared sort of how like when a child, if you have a young child who loves you dearly, and also you get ready to leave, and they don't want to leave your presence, what do? They will usually come up and they'll wrap their hands and their legs around your leg, and then what they hold on, saying, "Mommy, Daddy, please don't go," or "Grandma, Granddaddy, don't leave." And they just grab a hold with everything that is in there. That's the type of thing that sparks in my mind. And this is what the Bible declares to those that do this for the Lord. They just grab a hold of who He is. No matter what's going on, that they don't want Him to leave their presence. That they just tie on to Him, they just wrap around Him. Those are the ones that will find new strength. Those are the ones that will soar high on wings like eagles. Those are the ones who will run and not grow weary. Those are the ones who will walk and not faint, which means no matter what you're going through, He will see you through. He'll bring you to the other side, the same as He brought the Israelites from the one side of the Red Sea to the other. They had to go through all the plagues and everything else. They had to have their faith tested once again. But when they finally were obedient and trust what God said, they reached deliverance on the other side. And the enemy that was pursuing them, that enemy left them forever. That enemy never bothered them again. See, God is offering us a great deliverance. But we have to be willing to trust in Him, to wait upon Him, to grab a hold of Him. This is what He promises. This is the type of relationship this mind-blowing God is offering us. That He'll make a way where there seems to be no way. But you need to focus your eyes upon Him. Amen? So I want to declare to you today that our God is able. Our God is awesome. We serve an awesome God. I'm asking you to stand this morning. And again, I want to celebrate that angel. She dedicated her heart to the Lord, and we praise God for that. So I'm telling you, this whole thing we're doing is about changing lives. I want you to begin to look at God in a different way and understand that God, these may look like you never all say, God, I would love to see that too, but God does these type of things, and He makes these things available in our lives pretty much every day if we want Him to. They may be more symbolic than actual this, but I know God is still in these modern times does some very miraculous things, from raising people from the dead still. All these other God is still in the miracle working business. So whatever is going on, I'm here to tell you, God, Jesus is the answer.
Amen.
He's just looking for people who turn their eyes towards Him and believe in Him and understand that nothing is impossible for Him. Amen?
Amen.
So we're going to end this service today with a song with our God.